Alright, now it's time to get into the Godzilla movie that most fans say Mothra vs. Godzilla is to them, if that makes any sense. Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster came out in December of 1964, and in Japan it went under the title Three Giant Monsters, Earth's Greatest Battle. With the original Godzilla series from 1954 to 1975, it was common knowledge that the movies would have many different titles. They'd have a different one in Japan compared to that of America. And I also forgot to mention that for Godzilla Raids Again, it was known in Japan as Godzilla's Counterattack. Godzilla, King Kong vs. Godzilla, and Mothra vs. Godzilla share the same title in the United States and Japan and the rest of the world. But anyway, this movie was the second Godzilla film to be released in 1964 and serves as not only a sequel to Mothra vs. Godzilla, but Rodan. The movie opens up at nighttime in Japan, where we see a bunch of shooting stars in the sky. One of them happens to be a meteor that crashes into the mountainside, and a team of scientists go there to try to investigate it. Meanwhile, a police detective is assigned to protect the princess of this unknown fictional country. Toho had a habit of making fictional countries within their original science fiction series, even though the natives are either clearly American or clearly Japanese. It was weird. By the way, he's assigned to protect this princess because she is the target of assassins. At the same time, though, the princess gets possessed by a being from Venus, Mars in the American version, who heads to Japan and tries to warn the entire nation and the world about the impending doom that's on its way. And that includes the reappearance of Godzilla sometime after Mothra vs. Godzilla, the reappearance of Rodan, who everyone thought was killed back in his original movie, and the appearance of a monster that destroyed her entire planet of Venus, King Ghidorah. Now let's briefly talk about Rodan for a second before I continue with the plot description, because if you saw the 1956 movie Rodan, then you know that Rodan and his mate died. And not just died, they were burnt alive in Mount Aso. And it's a death scene that's so horrific and so clear that you're wondering, how can Rodan be alive at all? Because in this movie, Rodan pops up in the exact same area where the first two were killed. So did one of them just survive the molten lava? No, that's highly stupid. I would like to think that this is an offspring, because there were two Rodans, one male and one female in the original movie, and it was established that Rodan grows very quickly. Like, in the matter of days, it reaches from hatching from an egg to being a full-fledged adult. So I'm sure Toho has an official statement out there on what this Rodan is, but for now, until I find out or until someone puts it down in the comment section, I'm gonna say it's an offspring. But anyway, back to Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. Sure enough, all three monsters pop up, and the Mothra twins are involved, and they say that in order for Ghidorah to be defeated, because he's the greater of all the evils, Mothra has to unite Godzilla and Rodan, convince them to team up together and fight Ghidorah to defend the Earth. Full disclosure right now, out of all the original Godzilla movies made in this original series, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster is my favorite after the original Godzilla. The reason I say that is because it's one of the most important Godzilla movies, because this is when things really started to take a turn, sometimes for better and sometimes for worse. This is the very first Godzilla movie where he transitions into being a good guy, a defender of Earth, even if it takes a little bit of convincing. This is the first Godzilla movie that features an all-out monster mash between more than two monsters, because we got Godzilla, we got Rodan, we got Mothra, and we got the brand new monster, King Ghidorah. So that's two traditions that it started, having Godzilla be more of a good guy and the flat-out monster brawls. But more importantly, more than anything else, this movie introduced King Ghidorah. Every iconic figure in comics, science fiction, usually has an arch-enemy. With Batman, it's the Joker. With Spider-Man, it's the Green Goblin. And with Godzilla, it's King Ghidorah. It is nearly impossible to think of Godzilla without thinking of King Ghidorah. And King Ghidorah is one of the most iconic Godzilla monsters ever created. He's this three-headed golden dragon that towers over Godzilla. He's got large golden wings. He has two tails. He's a monster from outer space. He shoots lightning out of his mouth. He is just one of the greatest Godzilla characters ever created. And if you also kind of want to get an idea of what the roster will be for the upcoming Godzilla King of the Monsters from Legendary, it's gonna be this. All 4 monsters in this movie, Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah, are gonna be in the sequel to the American version. Although I imagine that movie's gonna have a completely different plot altogether. But anyway, back to this movie, and back to King Ghidorah specifically. His introduction here is incredible. He starts out as a meteor that crashes in the planet, then starts to grow continuously, and it's also a magnetic meteor. Sometimes it sucks in all kinds of metals toward it, but when King Ghidorah is actually born, it's an incredible sequence. You have this group of scientists led by Hiroshi Koizumi, and they wake up in the middle of the night to lightning effects. They see the meteor start to glow, they see it attracting a lot more metal, they see the meteor crack open, steam comes out, sparks fly, and then all of a sudden a fireball bursts out of the meteor and forms into the monster King Ghidorah. And Akira Ifukube's score really plays a significant part in this scene because it's the first time we hear King Ghidorah's theme. It is just so haunting, it's impactful. It really helps make King Ghidorah much more menacing considering that he has this roar right here. Not really a super menacing roar when you get right down to it. So that's me gushing about King Ghidorah. What else is in this movie? Well, for the longest time, Godzilla and Rodan spent most of the movie fighting each other. They come across paths in Mount Fuji and suddenly start fighting. And this is the first movie where the monsters are given personalities. You can really see defining character traits within them. And I think the scene that really sticks out to me in terms of showcasing the monster's personality is when Godzilla and Rodan are fighting each other. Mothra intervenes by webbing up Godzilla just briefly, and then Rodan is laughing hysterically. And as he's laughing, Mothra suddenly webs up Rodan, who's moving around with his jaw gaped open like, what the fuck is this shit all over me? And at the same time, Godzilla is laughing hysterically as well because it just caught Rodan off by surprise. So that's the first time we really get a sense of personality with the monsters. And I also really like how Ishiro Honda utilizes his theme of unity for the monsters. Godzilla and Rodan start off this movie destroying cities and fighting each other. Then Mothra intervenes to try to convince them to put aside their differences and fight King Ghidorah because Earth technically is their home. Even though Rodan and Godzilla do not like humans at all, at least at this point, that still doesn't change the fact that Ghidorah could destroy the entire Earth, and there's no other place for Godzilla and Rodan to go if that were to happen. So I really like that. And the 4-way monster mash between Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra versus King Ghidorah is really entertaining. And one of the big highlights is when Rodan allows Mothra to get on his back so she can shoot webs and cover up King Ghidorah's 3 heads and tie them together. It's a really fun sequence. Now that's all the monster stuff. All the monster stuff in this movie is A+ quality. What about the humans? Well, actually, the human stuff is not that bad either. And this kind of further emphasizes why I love this movie so much. It's because the human elements are important to the monster scenes, but at the same time, you're still invested in what's going on. A lot of the monsters don't really partake in live action until at least 45 minutes into the movie, which is a long time. But I found myself invested in what essentially is a detective mystery movie. The characters are still really charming. Yuriko Hoshi is back from Mothra vs. Godzilla, in which this time she plays a reporter herself, even though she's not the same character she was in the last movie. And you have Hiroshi Koizumi again as a scientist. That's apparently the only roles he has in these Godzilla movies, except for Raids Again. And then you have Akiko Wakabayashi, who was in King Kong vs. Godzilla as the best friend to Fumiko, and both of those actresses were actually in the James Bond film You Only Live Twice. But in this movie, she plays the princess who is possessed by the prophet from Venus, and she's probably the most monotone of all the main characters, but it's not in a way where she's necessarily bad or poorly written. It's very similar to how Hawkeye was in the very first Avengers movie, where she's not herself throughout the movie, and the moments when she is herself as the princess, not possessed by the prophet from Venus, she's actually kind of charming. Then you have the Peanuts once again coming back as the Mothra twins for the very last time, and they're still just as good as they were in Mothra and Mothra vs. Godzilla, even though when you consider the plot for Mothra, how they were kidnapped to be used for entertainment purposes, it is funny that this time they are doing televised shows in Japan, and they just seem happy about it. They could not care at all. They are living the life. So that's kind of weird. I mean, I guess they weren't forced against their own will. This was something that they chose to do. But I'm getting too much into the details. But then again, that just goes to show how long I could talk about Godzilla. I could go on this shit for hours, but I gotta wrap it up. In terms of problems, the assassins in the movie are actually some of the least charismatic actors throughout the whole thing. And whenever it's just focused on them, it really kind of drags the movie out. And then once the monsters actually start fighting near the end, the human characters really aren't given much to do. This is a big problem that a lot of the Godzilla movies go through. As much as I love the franchise, sometimes they put their human characters in positions to where they could just watch the monster action from the background. They don't really have much to offer outside of just standing somewhere in the distance watching the action. So it's because of the last bit of the movie where the human characters don't really have shit to do that I can't quite say get off your ass and go see it right now. I want to, because this is one of my top 5 favorite Godzilla movies out there. I adore Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster because it's a game changer in terms of the franchise. It is entertaining as hell to watch. It introduced the most iconic Godzilla villain out there. The score is incredible. There's just so much about it that I love that, you know what? Fuck it. When I did my original run of Godzilla reviews 5 years ago, I only gave the first movie Get Off Your Ass and Go See It Right Now. I'm gonna change that with Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. Get off your ass and go see it right now. This is truly one of my favorite Godzilla movies out there. And it's also on Filmstruck through the Criterion Collection, which looks beautiful. It's a beautiful restoration. So if you have a Filmstruck account, go watch Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster right there. In terms of the American version, there's not much. Like I said, I won't be going into full detail about the American versions for future movies outside of a little bit of trivia. It should be known that in America, Ghidorah was known as Ghidra. They got rid of the O. I think it might have been a misspelling. I usually call the monsters how they're called in the Atari games, like Destroy All Monsters Melee. And in there, they call it King Ghidorah. And in Japanese, the pronunciation is Kingu Ghidorah. So yeah, you could definitely hear an O in the name. And then I mentioned very briefly that in the American version, the prophet is from Mars and not Venus. I guess America just really loves Mars. And then lastly, this is a very interesting tidbit. There's an editing change in the American version that I actually think benefits the movie in terms of continuity. Let me see if I can break this down as best I can. In the Japanese version, once Godzilla and Rodan start fighting each other in Mount Fuji, it's daytime. Then we cut to the meteor just as Ghidorah is about to be born. That takes place at nighttime. And then once Ghidorah is born, we cut back to daytime where Ghidorah is on a rampage through Japan. And then we cut to Godzilla and Rodan continuously fighting. So when you watch the Japanese version, you're thinking, have they been fighting non-stop for an entire day? In the American version, this is actually fixed, where Ghidorah is born at nighttime before Godzilla and Rodan face each other in the daytime. So that makes a little more sense. It's a change that I actually appreciate. And then the American version added in some new music, but not only did it not take away the Akira Ifukube score, but the stock music that they actually put in kind of fits the tone of the film. Bottom line, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, one of my absolute favorites. And that's my review for Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. Tomorrow we're going to be taking a look at the next film involving King Ghidorah because he was that popular, Invasion of the Astro Monster. So until then, I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on the movie, if and when you've seen it. And as always, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.